There you are. I see you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do I sound any better?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah. There's no wah 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 in the background. No, it's good. I can
Cool.
repeat that if you like.
Yeah, hang on. Let me get to a better place here.
Okay.
Um,
I love technology.
yeah, no kidding. Uh, just trying to find a more flattering light. Here we go.
Oh, that's good.
How about that?
I'm getting a nice tour of your house. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, right. That's all of it. You've seen it all.
I've come to a conclusion after this is my second summit. I've come to this conclusion that the only reason why we need to have children is to help us with our technology.
Yeah, I know. My 12-year-olds have blossomed into that role now. It's humiliating, actually. I used to be, I was trained an engineer. I educated an engineer, so I took pride in my technical abilities till about 5 years ago. And, when the whole handheld revolution happened and we went from flip phones to basically handheld computers, I just gave up.
Well, this summit is a whole new level, and especially on the video side of things. So I appreciate you hanging in with me and reorganizing the wiring in your house to deal with this.
Yeah, I had to pull an old laptop out of retirement because my fancy new laptop does not have Ethernet connection on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. That is really good to know because we need it. We need to be hardwired. We think we can do it all by Wi-Fi, but we can't.
No, I can't even do it by Wi-Fi. So.
Wow. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
And I don't think a lot of people have actually seen your face in the dive industry. They've seen all your cartoons, but not who's behind the cartoons. So welcome.
Lucky them, huh?
So I read your bio, Jim, and so you are a mechanical engineer. My father was a mechanical engineer, but he was not a cartoonist. So how did that happen to you? What went down?
My grades. It was a family tradition. My granddad was an engineer, my dad was an engineer, my brother was an engineer, and when you're a sophomore in college and you don't know what to do with the rest of your life and you have to declare a major, I just figured I'd go the mechanical engineering route, like every other male in my family. So I kind of got swept into that whole family tradition thing, but I don't regret it. I really loved that education. So that was a good thing. A lot of people ask me why I didn't, get a degree in marine biology or oceanography or whatever. And I'd probably be out there being a scientist rather than a cartoonist. And I think maybe a cartoonist is a little bit more fun. I don't know. But I stayed with the engineering thing through my early 20s, mid 20s, to the extent that it was really engineering. It really was just, cubicle pushing paper around more than anything. And then I was a political cartoonist in college, and I really missed that. I really wanted to do more cartooning and publishing. So I started submitting political cartoons to the local paper, and one thing led to another, and I eventually, I guess by my late 20s, was able to quit my day job and do the cartooning thing.
Wow. Who wouldn't want to do that? I mean, this is incredible that you've been able to take something that you've always been good at and actually turn it into a lucrative career.
I wouldn't go that far. But
Well,
gosh.
you're keeping a lovely roof over your head.
Right.
Yeah. But you didn't just stop there because I understand that you've got a degree in, was it environmental management? Is that? Yeah.
So, believe it or not, I have a degree in management, and if you know me, you'd know that you'd appreciate the fact that I have no management skills at all. I cannot manage my home technology, much less the environment. So, but I did. I went back. I was cartooning for about 10 years, and I got more and more into, I guess, the higher purpose that I was hoping my cartoon would provide, which is a little bit more awareness of the ocean environment. And I thought, well, you know what? I really need is a little bit more street cred. I need to know what I'm talking about. That always helps. So I decided to get a master's in environmental management just to, I guess, understand more deeply some of the things that I was trying to write about in the cartoon.
And you have been very adept at bringing some of these issues, environmental issues, into Sherman's Lagoon. I love it. It's hilarious.
Thanks.
But you've hit some major things. One of which I know was quite controversial. Poor old Sherman, the great white shark, got finned. Can you tell us the uproar around that?
Well, I don't know if there was them. There were readers who were upset, I suppose, but I was actually expecting more uproar. And I think so. In a nutshell, the storyline went like this: Sherman got finned. He was caught by a trawler, and he got his fins cut off and thrown back in the water, and actually died. I killed my main character, which is sort of not something you're supposed to do in the cartooning world. He went to shark heaven. He actually went to hog's heaven first, and then liked it there, but he couldn't stay because he wasn't a hog, so he went to shark heaven. And St. Peter said something to the effect of, we're getting an awful lot of sharks up here. What's going on down there? And he said, well, they're killing all the sharks on planet Earth. So St. Peter sent him back down to Earth and said, you're not ready to die yet. So it turned into a near-death experience, so to speak. Then he enlisted, speaking of, young people knowing technology better than the old farts like me, he enlisted his friend Ernest, who's a young techno whiz, to find his fins on the internet. And he actually found them on a site called Alibaba.com. And at that time, they actually sold shark fins. So he clicked buy. He did the one-click purchase thing and got his own fins shipped back to him, and they were surgically reattached. And then I brought the whole Sherman world back to normal again, which is where you're supposed to bring it after one of those crazy storylines. It was interesting because I think the readers who did express their dissatisfaction, there were really two categories of people. There were the ones who equated environmentalism with liberal politics, and they accused me of getting political. And I'm typically not a political comic strip. And I disagree with that characterization of environmentalism being associated with left-wing politics. I think it's something that more and more is coming from the center of the spectrum and even the right. So it shouldn't be a political statement to make a statement on the environment. That was, I guess, the first category of upset reader when I addressed that argument, I just said, look, this is not a political thing. This is about our environment. But a lot of readers talked about how, maybe we're better off without sharks, because they do kill people. And to them, I said, look, if somebody drowns in a river, does that make that river's environmental value? Does it diminish its environmental ecological value? Does human safety and natural resources, those are both important issues, but does one affect the other? So just because a shark every now and then, maybe 5 times a year, can be directly related to an injury or a death, does that diminish its ecological value? And the answer is, in my opinion, no, of course not. Otherwise, if somebody drowns in a river, then maybe we should build a paper mill on that river because its ecological value is less because it's killed somebody. It's a ridiculous connection. So,
and it shows the disconnect. I mean, that myth. It shows the disconnect we have with our own environment.
Right.
And and that's, I guess that's what you do is you portray the underwater world as you would connect to our world, our Earth world, and it's a wonderful connection because it really starts to get people thinking about, how we impact our world, not just topside but below, and what are the other issues that you brought up to try to connect people to what's going on other than the shark finning? You've done a few things.
Sure. So, for example, I did one on plastic litter, marine litter, and that was a good one. What I did, the storyline there was I turned basically two of my characters into humans, and I brought them into the Midwest of the USA, and they dropped a plastic bottle into a river, and they followed into a stream, and they followed it into a river, and then into a bigger river, then ultimately into the Columbia River, and then ultimately into the Pacific Ocean, and then on to the so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch. But I wanted to illustrate there that plastics, first of all, is the most insidious form of marine debris out there, and it doesn't go away. And oftentimes, litter that is disposed of far inland will end up in the ocean. And it's kind of a letting the genie out of the bottle exercise because it's hard to get back. It breaks up into tiny little pieces, and it's probably irrecoverable. So we need to really do something about that as quickly as possible.
And the fact that most people in the center of the country don't see the connection
right.
to the ocean, that we are completely disconnected, being in the Midwest or Central Canada or wherever you are, central in some country, you don't recognize until you see you open your comic and you see these crazy characters floating down the river and realizing, oh my gosh. And I think that's a cool thing. What you do is because you can talk about these things in such a way that people are open to it, that their guard is down because you're
right.
funny. And people want to see your strip every week, and they want to, they expect it, they're ready for it, and they're open for it. And then when you slide in this environmental issue, I think it's a very ingenious way to keep it calm, but get the word out. This is what's actually going on, and I think this is a problem that we have as the dive industry, because these issues can be perceived as bad for business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't say anything, and we don't have so far a mechanism like you do, humor, and a very short time period. You've got mm-hmm. so many frames that you get the message out. We don't have that in the dive industry. So what do we do? What do you think? Got any thoughts for us? How do we address this?
Well, sure. Okay, so humor is one way to get the message out. So I basically take a bitter pill and I coat it with sugar, and then I trick somebody into eating it. Basically, is what I do. But if you take a step back and look at the broader technique that I'm using, it's really storytelling, right? So, and storytelling is old as time, is the most effective way to convey information from one human being to another. It goes back to prehistory, right? All the stories that were told in the caves and around the bonfires and so forth. All of our knowledge until the point where we invented the printing press was storytelling, passed from generation to generation. The Bible, the Quran, whatever. Pick all the great books. And so we can still do that because I think it's still the most effective way to convey information. And divers being on the front lines of, personally witnessing the ocean environment and having the advantage of, in many cases, witnessing it over a span of time, whether it's 5 years or 25 years. I have plenty of friends who are divers, myself included, I've been certified for probably 30 years. So I've seen, and a lot of these divers, like the people who like to walk the same path in the woods, and they see the degradation over time and the change over the time. A lot of these divers know their dive, their reef, their spot, and they can see that degradation. And I think those personal testimonies are really compelling. And you can, your first line audience is really the other divers in the dive magazines and the blogs and the websites. But there's nothing keeping those divers from telling that story to a broader audience, because I think it's a very compelling source, and and there's a personal story attached.
Yeah, and it's coming from the heart rather than the head, because that's what you do with your cartoons. You really hit our heart and our funny bones, and so it bypasses the rational head, and we just accept it for what it is. So that's what storytelling does. It gets us into our heart space, and so we're much more receptive to what's going on, and maybe hopefully being part of the solution. And
Yep.
and so it's fair. I find this fascinating because here you are, you're a mechanical engineer. You also have your master's in environmental management, and so then you're a cartoonist. So you combine all of these skills. Nothing was ever lost, right? You just keep adding on to your skill base. Your career path has expanded to this place now where you're working with the UN. I mean, who knew that Sherman would be hanging out with people at the UN? I mean, that's great.
Yeah, that's been fun. That's been a lot of fun. And that's a slightly different art form. That's just short video, which I love. I love doing the comic strip, but there's certain disadvantages to being a cartoonist. I know they might be difficult to see from your side, but it is a job that's very isolating. You're working in your own world, and you're filling a blank piece of paper every day, and that can get kind of exhausting. So I took on video, and really video hosting and animation, just as a way to, I guess, repurpose my skills a little bit, because the only marketable skill you have as a cartoonist is you can write short, pithy dialogue. That's the only thing you do all day long, really. So
but that's valuable.
Well, I guess if you're buying short, pithy dialogue, it's not valuable to
There's a market.
But it is valuable in the TV business and the video industry. So being able to actually draw an idea instead of going out and shooting it saves a lot of money. So if I need to go to outer space, I just draw outer space. If I need a herd of elephants or whatever, I just draw it. And so the sky's the limit in terms of what I can put on the screen, which is a real luxury as a filmmaker, because usually that's the kind of stuff costs millions of dollars.
Well, it's very entertaining, because here you are. You've got the UN has hired you to do this in these 2 minutes for the ocean videos, and in 2 minutes, I can't believe how you can explain huge concepts using your voice, B-roll shots, and cartooning. And it's very fast, and it gets the point across.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
It's 2 minutes, because that's our attention span.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I do talk like an auctioneer, so it does get gets a little. I looked at the French translation of it, and
it was 3.5 minutes for the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. The poor translators just cannot keep up with my auctioneer pace. But you're right. I mean, I think you identified something that's really important about ocean communication, or communication in general, which is that you need to touch emotion, and that's what art does. Really, that's my simple definition of art: is that a medium that evokes emotion. And if you can do that with and apply some kind of lesson to it, you're really, I think, accomplishing a lot, and you're hopefully changing a lot of hearts and minds.
Well, you with this 2 minutes for the ocean, you covered. Is there 6 right now that you've done?
There's 7.
There's 7 now. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us what issues you covered in the space of 2 minutes?
Let's see. The first one was blue carbon, and then I did marine litter. Okay, so blue carbon essentially is mostly the coastal ecosystems, the grasses, seagrasses, and the mangroves, and how much they sequester carbon, and to a certain extent, the microorganisms in the ocean. And then the next one was marine litter. The next one was the economic value of the ocean. Then there was one on sea level rise. Then there was one on, what else was there? I've got a list right here somewhere. Hang on.
There's the climate change connection, which I thought was incredible. How you address the debate. That was amazing. And so that, how are we up to? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're missing 2.
There was wastewater.
Oh, right.
And ocean value, nutrient runoff.
Nutrient runoff. That was the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, some of these are a little bit arcane because they're, they were really the leading issues for a certain. It varied from person to person who wanted to, get their lead issue out there on video. But when I first heard the topic, I just rolled my eyes and said, "How am I ever going to do anything entertaining on nutrient runoff?" But when you dig into it, you can make anything fun. I guess that was fun. That one actually won the Blue Ocean Film Fest animation category last fall. So. Well,
I know because I was one of the judges.
Oh, you were? Okay. There you go.
No, it was excellent. It was really excellent, and I went through all of your videos, and I particularly I was impressed by all of them, obviously, but I was particularly impressed by how you approach the climate change connection and the debate.
Right.
And can you just say how you dealt with the debate? It was very simple, and it was like done deal.
Yeah, so that script probably was rewritten more than any of the others, and we had to stick with the 2-minute format, but I kept ending up with 4 and 5 minute scripts because I wanted to sort of lay the groundwork for why climate change, why we're talking about climate change, and there's a lot of nuances to it that I couldn't put in the video, and after a long discussion with the folks at the UN, we decided to just sort of make that a given and go right into what sort of adaptations are required for it, and that and there was a debate about how that just limits the audience to the believers, but it probably would have been impossible to create a 2-minute video to do it all. Yeah. What I really wanted to do in the beginning of that video was, and it ended up all getting cut out for good reasons, because it was too long and it was just too didactic and everything. But what I really wanted the opening line was climate change. What was it? It was climate changes. Climate's been changing for millions of years. And there's all kinds of geological evidence for climate change. And the fact that climate is changing a certain way now is there's irrefutable evidence that it is because of mankind, anthropogenic activity. And here's why. The greenhouse gas theory has been around for almost 200 years. This is not some, thing that popped up in the 60s with hippy-dippy environmentalism. This is a 200-year-old theory. And it is, the types of carbon that are being tested in the atmosphere are an isotope that are directly related to fossil fuels. They are not the carbon that is typically found in the carbon cycle. So there's all kinds of irrefutable evidence that that speaks to higher man-made carbon levels and the greenhouse gas theory and all of that put together. And that's why I got too long. That's why I got cut. I just couldn't articulate quickly enough. But that's a whole other argument. And it was really, I think we were really more focusing on what to do about it.
Yeah. So in our industry, what can we do about it? Because some people I'm talking to say, well, we can't do anything on a global level, but we can do something on a local level. And other people are saying, we can't really do anything about it at all. And then there's other people who are saying we have to do both. We have to, think globally, act locally, which is, of course, my theory. In the dive industry, what can we do to address carbon? Carbon is the big elephant.
Right. So I think, you hear a lot of people suggest reduce our carbon footprint, and that's all well and good, but honestly, reducing your carbon, a voluntary approach to reducing carbon footprint will only make the trends increase a little bit more slowly. The fact is that we need to find a technological solution to replacing fossil fuels. And in order to get there, and I don't know if you filled your tank, I filled my gas tank yesterday, and it's $2.65 a gallon. So we're not getting there anytime soon.
Yeah.
Right? Democracy and free markets work incredibly well. They give people what they want. And right now we want a cheap way to get from A to B, and that's wonderful. I mean, the system is working in that regard. The problem is that we need to overcome an incredibly difficult barrier here, which is that we need to, accelerate technological change to replace fossil fuels quickly, and that's tricky. But where I'm going with this is that divers can be communicators, and their world is being affected by carbon, as you well know. The ocean acidification is directly linked to too much carbon in the atmosphere, and all of the collateral damage from OA is changing the divers' worlds. Right? It's killing coral reefs. It's doing all kinds of things to that beautiful environment that so many of those divers have, 30 years ago were enjoying, are now looking at. We're looking at dead or bleached white coral reefs that were a box of crayons 20 years ago. So I think, again, telling those stories of how the world is changing is probably the most effective way that divers can help this situation.
And going back to your climate change connection, what can we do about it? What we can tell the story, we can make the connection, but we as businesses, we can say this is what's going on, and then this is what you can do.
Mm-hmm. Right. As businesses, as dive industry businesses.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. It's ultimately it really is. It's all about technology. We need to develop technology that replaces fossil fuel. Period. In order to get there, we need to come up with regulations that force us to do that, because fossil fuel in general is such a cheap source of energy that we're never going to get there with the free market. And are we going to get there with regulation? I doubt it, because of there's just the level of regulation that would be required to get us to 50% renewable energy in 10 years is mind-boggling. So,
well, what we really need is we need political will. So,
right.
I guess we're talking about seagrass roots movements here to make sure that our people in Congress know that we want to change, and we're, even though this carbon is cheap for us, these fossil fuels are cheap, they're destroying our world. Mm-hmm. Right. I know for me, I sign every petition there is going out there, whether it has related to the tar sands or related to what's going on in Australia with the coal terminals, whatever there is having to do with giving subsidies for renewables and taxes on fossil fuels and just changing the game. That's what I do. But I don't know. Do you think am I being political or am I being environmental?
Well, it gets back to what I was saying before. I think as long as the environmental movement is left of center, and I think there's a lot of impartial observers would probably declare it that way. And it doesn't have to be, because there's a lot about the environmental movement that should appeal to right of center, that should appeal to the people of faith, that should appeal to a lot, the military, business owners, everybody, that make up a lot of the right side of the spectrum politically. It's just kind of ended up over on the left, maybe as a result of the 60s, when environmentalism and civil rights and a lot of these other things sort of grew from the same quarter. I don't know. Certainly before the 60s, it was, Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. He was one of our most environmentally aware presidents ever. And, that was 1902 or 1900 when he took office, right? I don't think he had a Christmas tree. It was a waste of a damn good tree to cut it down and put it in the White House. So, we could, if we could bring environmentalism to the political center, I think it would solve a lot of problems on the policy part of it and the regulation part of it, which is where we need to go in order to force industries to develop technologies to replace fossil fuels. I think this is the only way to get there, and probably bringing environmentalism to the center is the only way we're going to get there.
Yeah. We don't have this problem in Europe as much. They don't have their own source of fossil fuels, so they're making the shift to renewable energies just because they have to. Unfortunately, we're part of the problem, and we don't think we have to do any change. So I appreciate this discussion about the whole political side, because it has become kind of a political debate in the industry, and this whole business of not being able to talk about it because it's going to restrain trade and all of these things without really understanding how we've got this tragedy of the commons, and we're all throwing stuff up in the air and into the water, and we're all paying for it. But except for the companies that are involved in it.
Right.
They're making out like bandits. Listen, what are you up to next? What's going on? I know you do a lot of stuff with Sylvia at Mission Blue, and I know I had Deanna Cohen on. She was a TED. I call her a TED talker, but she says we're called TEDsters, and you're a TEDster. So do you have any other cool things going on?
Well, I'm going to. We bought a catamaran, and we're going to be living on the ocean for a year, starting in July.
Wow.
That's my coolest thing. In terms of work, I'm working on last summer I was invited to do a dive on DSV Alvin, which is one of the most famous submersibles out there. And so I got a chance to go down to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, which was 2 miles deep, 3,300 meters. And I'm going to produce a short video about that. So that's my next video project.
I want 2 minutes for the ocean for the dive industry. When are we going to do that one? I
am talking to the UN about the next installment, which would be about blue diving. So, yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
We'll see.
Okay, we're going to talk. We're going to talk about
Excellent.
content, about stories.
Sure. Yes. Storytelling, remember. That's the most important thing.
Storytelling.
Absolutely.
Listen, Jim, it's great talking with you, and I'm going to be seeing you soon. I'm going to be in DC for a few big events, so I know I'm going to see you there.
Okay, look forward to it, Laurie.
Okay, take care.
Really enjoyed the interview. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.